Nurse Jackie here. Welcome to the addendum video for documentation for Camp Nejeda. This video includes some new information for the summer of 2021 when we're using some electronic versions of documentation. It is extremely important if you are a new nurse coming to camp this summer, you need to watch first the documentation video. I'm going to reference a lot of things in that video and a lot of things I'm going to expect that you already know about documentation at camp. So please, if you have not watched that yet, there's a link right up here in the upper left corner that you can click to go watch the initial documentation video and then come back here and watch this when you're through. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in to the new stuff we're going to have for camp in 2021. So this video is meant for anybody that's going to be doing anything with blood sugars at camp, basically. So that would include counselors, nurses, AODs, that type of people. We have something really, really cool and new. It was made by Max Diaz, who's the most awesome guy. He made what we're calling eSpecSheets, right? So instead of spec sheets being on paper, right? Meaning, of course, the pieces of paper that the counselors are writing the campers' blood sugars, the grams of carbs they're predicted to eat, etc., and then running those over paper to the health center before meals. Now all of that is going to be done digitally, hence the E in eSpecSheets, right? We're also doing event cards, which is the exact same type of concept. So instead of event cards being on paper, they're going to be digital. So it's really, really neat. So let me jump in and show you what those look like. So here's your first example of the eSpecSheet. Ooh, looks really cool, huh? So how it works, down here at the bottom, we have got all of these little tabs, right? So each of these tabs is signifying the cabin and whether it is the general meals, meaning breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime snack, or if it's the nighttime or overnight checks, right? Meaning your midnight, your 3 a.m., that type of stuff. These eSpecSheets are created inside of Google Sheets, if you're familiar with that application. So they are easily accessed either on a laptop, right? Like for right now, I'm showing it to you guys on my desktop computer. Works well, looks really great on a laptop. But obviously, carrying around laptops at camp is like not the easiest thing. So at camp, we're going to be using it on either tablets, like iPads, that type of thing. And there will be iPads provided to all of the cabin nurses to be able to log this stuff. Or you can also view it on a smartphone, and you would just use the Google Sheets application. It's very easy to find. It's available on almost any device. You download it, you will get a link to the particular eSpecSheet for your session. You'll be able to open it up. So Google Sheets is like really, really neat and interesting because it's all updated in real time via the fancy thing that is the internet. So if I go and I type something into it, like for example, my Spec 1 camper Aaron sample, if his blood sugar at breakfast on January the 1st, 2020 was 200 and I type that in, that 200 is now going to show up everywhere, right? So it's going to show up not just on my smartphone or on my iPad. It's going to show up on every single one because they're linked through the internet. The one thing to be careful of is you don't want to delete anything. There are going to be certain fields in the Google Sheets that are going to be protected, that you're not going to be able to touch. So basically you don't mess anything up, right? So don't be worried about messing anything up. Only thing to be careful for is if you input a blood sugar, right, for Aaron, do not then go in and delete that entry because it won't just delete off of yours, it'll delete off of everybody's. Right? So really treat this the same way that you would documentation on paper. Once it is written, it's there. You should not be erasing anything on paper, just like you should never erase anything here. At the beginning of camp, right after check-in, just how previously we would have like this gigantic list with all of the cabins, all of the campers in each cabin, that now is also going to be inputted into the eSpecSheet, right? So they're going to be, every cabin will have a list of campers just like this, with their spec number here on the left. and then their device acronym next to it. So these are going to be standardized acronyms. They're new for this year, and we made them to simplify things. So instead of just pump or shots, it's a little bit more complicated with pumps nowadays, right? Now we have our closed loop pumps, for example, the Medtronic 670 or 770G, the Tandem Tslim X2 with Control IQ, and eventually in the future, the Omnipod 5. Right? And those work very differently from your regular types of pumps. So we wanted to find a way to designate that on all the types of documentation. So the way we've done it for the eSpecSheets is this little device column. So here are your options, right? We'll start with the easiest ones first. So ND stands for non-diabetic, right? Somebody that does not have diabetes, maybe it's a nurse's kid, etc. S stands for shots. So that's somebody on multiple daily injections and not wearing a pump. The rest of these are designating pumps. So we have O for Omnipod, we have M for Medtronic, and we have T for Tandem. And you'll notice the T's and the M's have some C's. The C's designate a closed loop pump. So for example, a T would be a regular tandem pump, whereas TC would be a tandem closed loop pump, meaning a tandem Control IQ pump. Ditto for Medtronic, and M is a regular Medtronic pump. MC would be a closed loop Medtronic pump, meaning a 670 or 770G being run in auto mode. So you'll see for now, we just have O for Omnipod, but eventually Omnipod will release their closed loop system called Omnipod 5, and we will designate that as OC as well. So that being said, you can take a quick look at cabin 8 in our mythical session 0, right? Aaron here has an O, so he is using a regular Omnipod. Betty here has an S, so she is on shots. Carlos has TC, so he is on the closed loop system by Tandem. And Darius here has an MC, so he is using the Medtronic closed loop system. Trust me, you'll get really, really used to these very quickly. So basically everything in this column will be all filled out before you do the first meal on the first day of camp. Let's talk about first what the counselors are going to do. So this works the exact same way as those paper spec sheets that you're used to, and it's laid out in the exact same way too. So you can see for Aaron, spec 1, at breakfast on this day, this is where you would input the blood sugar before breakfast on 1/1/20 for Aaron. Makes sense, right? So for example, let's say Aaron's blood sugar before breakfast this day was 150. We would type in 150. If you needed to check ketones because the blood sugar was high, you can input the ketone result here. Since we're pretending his blood sugar was 150, we wouldn't check ketones for that, so we would simply just leave this blank. This right here for treatment is where we would write in if you needed to treat a low blood sugar, right? Be brief and terse with this, right? We also have acronyms for low treatment. That would be a T for tabs, J for juice, or C for crackers. Now here is what you're going to fill out for pretty much everybody. We have both the pre-carbs and the extra carbs. So pre-carbs, of course, is the amount of carbs that the camper is predicting that they are going to eat before the meal, because you're getting the meals in advance, everyone's counting together. Let's say that Aaron says, oh, I've counted everything. I predict I'm going to eat 60 grams. So you would type in 60 here. No need to put a G or anything like that. It's gonna mess things up. Go ahead and just put 60. There's a little area for notes in case there's something really important that you want to make sure to let the nurse know. You're not going to use this very often, but there was a notes area on the paper spec sheet, so we have one here just in case you need to use it. Let's go ahead and fill in the rest of this breakfast so you can kind of see. So let's say maybe Betty's blood sugar was a bit high, was 300. If you enter a high or a low, it's going to be colored. So if I enter something above 200, it's going to get colored orange. If I were to enter something low, say maybe Carlos had a low blood sugar of 60, something below 70, it's going to be blue. So it kind of, is really visually nice for the nurse to see, I can see that this blood sugar was high or low. Let's say for Betty, she did check the ketones. Let's say they were trace. So we would go ahead and put that in here. Let's say that Betty counted 42 grams. And then we'll move to Carlos. Let's say Carlos's blood sugar was 60. Let's say we gave tabs, so I can simply write a T because that signifies I gave tabs. And let's say that they're predicted to have 35 grams of carbs. One example of what you might use the notes section for would be a recheck after a low blood sugar, because you know if the blood sugar is low, we need to give tabs, wait 15 minutes, and recheck the blood sugar. So let's say that we did that for Carlos and his recheck was 85, right? So you could write in here, recheck 85. So that's letting that nurse know, yes, we did the recheck. Yes, the blood sugar was fine. The nice thing about this is you can update these in real time. So you wouldn't have to wait to say run the paper spec sheet until after Carlos rechecked after the low. You could simply input these as it happens. Now let's move on to the nurse. Instead of waiting to receive that spec sheet, right? Which we know some counselors, it's like, oh my gosh, David, I've been waiting all day for your spec sheet. You don't have to worry too much about that anymore, right? Now you're basically constantly looking at your phone and waiting for these numbers to come in. And the nice thing is as they're being done, the counselor is inputting them, so you're getting those numbers in real time. So if there's one straggler kid that's just like spending 20 minutes in the bathroom before they spec for dinner, you don't have to wait for that. The whole cabin doesn't have to wait for that one kid, right? So you're gonna get it in real time. As the numbers pop in, you will be using these numbers the same way you always did with the paper spec sheets, meaning you're taking those blood sugars and those pre-carbs, you're making your cheat sheets, right? And you're calculating those doses. Exact same, no difference, except now this is digital. The meal dosing would work the exact same way, right? You're going out to the pavilion, you're doing everything the exact same way. Everything that was written on paper in the Cardex is still written on paper in the Cardex, right? So let's say the nurse receives all of this information here. He or she has written down on their cheat sheets, right? And now they go out to the pavilion and they do all the insulin for their cabin, right? So the cabin goes off and they go to eat. So we'll transition over to, again, what the counselors are doing. So the counselor's sitting down for the meal, serving the kiddos, doing however it works at the meal time, and counting those carbs, right? And seeing how many carbs the camper actually ate. Then, the same way you would do before, with the paper sheets, right, where you're writing in the actual carbs that the kid ate, right? Now what we're doing is we're writing that in the eSpec sheet. This column, as a reminder, is extra carbs. It is not total carbs, right? So for example, let's say Aaron is sitting down and he predicted he was going to eat 60 grams, but those grilled cheeses looked so delicious and the kitchen happened to have extra, so he had an extra grilled cheese, right? 30 more grams. So he actually ate 90 grams instead of 60. So under extra carbs, you would write 30 because he ate 30 extra carbs. You would not write 90 because he did not eat 90 more than 60. He ate 90 in total, meaning 30 more than 60, right? So you would write it in and it's going to highlight it yellow. If the camper eats extra carbs, that means they're going to need extra insulin after the meal. It's going to highlight yellow so that way the nurse knows, I gotta see Aaron after the meal. Now let's go with Betty. I'm just realizing now that that is a female in a cabin full of males, but that's okay. This is for fun anyway. So let's say that Betty ate exactly the 42 grams that she planned to eat. How many extra carbs did she eat? Did you say 0? Then yes, you are correct, right? So for now, you would simply leave this blank, right? If it is blank, it is assumed that she has not eaten extra carbs, right? So ta-da. Carlos, let's say that he ate 10 extra carbs. He ate 45 instead of 35. And then let's say that Darius ate exactly 57. Post-meal would work the same way. Everybody goes out, goes to the pavilion. The campers that ate more than they planned need to meet with the nurse at the pavilion after the meal to receive the extra amount of insulin. You would calculate that the same way you did before. You're just pulling that extra carbs instead of from the paper, from the eSpec sheet on your phone or on your tablet. So for example, we would meet with Aaron, we would see, oh, he ate 30 extra carbs, so we need to give insulin for those extra 30 carbs, etc., right? So we would do that. The nurse would go back into the health center after the meal, document everything on the Cardex the same way we always would. Nice thing is, you're going to have a whole lot less paper that you're going to need to throw away, right? So hopefully we'll be able to save some paper with the system too. Of course, that works the same way for lunch. So if you see you scroll down on the same tab for this cabinet meals, we see lunch has its own section, dinner has its own section, and bedtime snack has its own section. All of these are dosed the exact same way. The data is inputted the same way, documented the same way, everything is the same, etc. So now let's move on to nighttime or overnight. So there is another tab right down here. You saw me select. It has the same cabin. So this was cabin 8 meals. Now I'm going to cabin 8 night. For example, when we do bedtime snack, right? Once again, all of these would be the same, right? So I'm just gonna write in some random blood sugars here. I'm gonna go ahead and give this some moderate ketones. We'll make it interesting. We'll say this was tabs. We'll say the recheck here was 85, right? And let's say everybody had their bedtime snack. Let's say it was 30, because it's usually the same for the whole cabin. They eat the same thing. Once you move into night, see how all of those blood sugars from bedtime automatically populated into the overnight list. Ooh, so nice, right? So this is great for the nurses because we no longer have to specifically fill out that overnight sheet with all of those bedtime specs, right? Because they're all already here. Overnight, right? We know that it's the counselors checking and treating blood sugars at midnight. So what the counselor would do is the same thing they always did, check everybody at midnight and treat the blood sugars however they're meant to be treated and write everything down. So let's go ahead and let's check some midnight blood sugars. So let's say that this one was maybe 105, right? Let's say that Betty, that correction she got at bedtime worked really, really heavily, right? And she dropped like a rock. And let's say her blood sugar is 90 now at midnight. Notice how right here, this 3 a.m. check lit up yellow, right? And that's because my nurses know that the policies for who gets checked at 3 a.m. includes if your blood sugar drops more than 200 points from bedtime to midnight. We know the other rules are if you have any blood sugar under 40 during the day, or if you have a severe hypoglycemic event. So let's say, for example, Carlos at dinner time, maybe his blood sugar was 35, right? Of course, it'll highlight blue because that is low. But when we come here, Carlos now also has his 3 a.m. blood sugar for this day highlighted yellow to let you know this we must check at 3 a.m. Let's put in the rest of these specs. So let's say the midnight one here maybe was 160, right? And then maybe this one was 180, right? Oh, we don't have any lows. I should put a low one in. That way we can practice, right? So the treatment for example of blood sugar 105 at midnight would be the shot, right? So we give that little shot of SIB. This one, the blood sugar dropped, right? So this would be, let's see, it would be the juice plus SIB, right? So example, we're using those acronyms here as well, right? 160 would be none, so we would write nothing. This would be juice, right? And then the recheck, let's see, let's pretend the recheck, let's see, was 85, right? So then that means afterwards, right after we gave the juice, the blood sugar was still 85, then we would give the SIB, right? So at 3 a.m., then the overnight nurse, the health center assistant would be checking these blood sugars and again, inputting them in the eSpecSheets, right? So let's say Betty's blood sugar is now 150. Lovely. Let's see that Carlos's happens to be 200. Great. And then Darius's, let's say that he went low again, having a rough day. right? So again, we would write the same thing. Let's say it was juice, his recheck was 90, and he got SIB. Let's say just for interest, let's say this blood sugar was 300, right? So then this would get a correction, right? So it would give a half correction. So we would write that in. So let's pretend a half correction for this patient was for this camper was 2 units, right? So that is an example of a treatment that you would write here, right? And then eventually that would get transferred into the Cardex in the morning, just like it always would, right? Let's talk about the next thing that we have here, which are the event cards. So I scrolled over. Oh, you can't see it with my face. Here we go. So I scrolled over here, and you can see that the event cards tab is right down here. So I'm going to go ahead and click the event cards, and this is what they look like. It looks chaotic, but I promise it's not bad. So these replace the actual event cards, the little purple cards that the counselors would fill out and then drop off in the health center when they passed by before the next meal. So we have our treatment protocol listed over here. So that treatment for lows, right? If there are any changes made, of course, between when I'm making this video in summer 2021, and they'll be right up here. So these are always going to be the most updated protocols. Say you're a counselor, say you're out and about, and Betty from cabin 8 says, oh, I feel low. So you check, and let's say the blood sugar is 60. So you would typically give 4 glucose tablets, right? Wait 15 minutes, recheck the blood sugar, and let's say her recheck was 90. So we need to document all of that. So here's how that would work. At the time of checking the blood sugar, ideally is when you are going in and writing this down. So just like how before you would be pulling out that purple event card at the same time that she's checking, you would want to pull out the phone or the tablet and document this in real time is going to be the best. I'll show you why in a second. So you would, of course, select the cabin. So Betty's in cabin 8. Betty was spec number 2. We would write her name in here, Betty. And then we're going to skip over this time for 1 second, and we're going to write in her blood sugar, which was 60. Notice what happens. It automatically puts in the current time. And I'm filming this at 8:45 p.m. So it has automatically filled that this blood sugar was checked at 8:45. This is why it's so helpful to log this in real time, because it's going to be able to log the exact time for you without needing to type it in. And then we're going to select our first treatment, which we gave tabs, right? So there's that T right there. 15 minutes later, right, we would recheck the blood sugar. So when we recheck it is when I would type it in, right? Which, let's say 15 minutes later, it was 90. Of course, I'm not inputting this in real time. They say the same time, right? But in reality, you would be putting this in real time. So this would be 9 p.m., right? 15 minutes later. Second treatment, we would give crackers, because after the blood sugar comes up, we typically give a package of goldfish crackers, and then the kiddo goes on their way. So this is everything that the counselor would need to do. They would also need to write in their name, right? So I'll go ahead and write my name in. Then what happens is instead of the nurse on duty in the health center waiting for all of these little event cards to come in the little basket, they would simply be checking the event cards, right, on the Google Sheets app. So at some point during your coverage of the health center, you would go in and you would open this up, and you're going to transfer this information into the Cardex. Same way you would do this before with the little purple cards, but now it's digital, right? I feel like I'm saying that a lot. It's the same thing, but it's digital, but it's true, right? So the nurse on duty would see, oh, I can see at 8:45 p.m. Betty had a low blood sugar. Let me go write that in the Cardex. So we would get out cabin 8's Cardex. We would find Betty. We would input all of this information into the Cardex. Then, to signify that it has been documented, we would check it off. Once it's checked off, it will do a strike through and it will close it out. So that way anybody seeing this afterwards would know, oh, this has been documented, right? So that's really nice. Really, anybody that's able to can document these event cards. It's typically the nurse that's that's stationed in the health center at whatever time of day that the event cards come in. Very important to, of course, make sure that you input this information into the Cardex. So that way the nurse, when they're coming upon the next meal, sees them in there and sees, oh, so-and-so had a low, right? But the nice thing is that these are all kept track of. So if a nurse was ever like, I didn't see any event cards get entered for any of my campers, let me just double check. Anybody can open up this event cards tab and see all of the event cards that came in and see if maybe one of them wasn't ticked off and hadn't been entered yet. Then they could be able to enter it and then tick it off to let people know that it's been documented. There's one more tab that we might be using, and this is a specific 2021 thing, which is temperature checks, right? So of course, based on the COVID protocols that you're gonna get your ear talked off about, it's important that we're checking temperatures at specific times throughout camp, and we're gonna need to document those temperatures. So in here is another like electronic sheet where you could document those temperatures. This works very normally. Say the temperature was 99.0, you're going to input it, it's going to be there, right? If you document a temperature that is higher than 100, it is going to pop up as red, right? Meaning high, a fever, there is something else that needs to be done with that camper, right? Just a kind of a nice visual, this is high type of thing. But this is pretty self-explanatory. There's obviously a column for every single day, right? And all of the spec numbers. Each cabin has their own one, so you would just find and input them. There's also places for staff members' temperatures, health center staff temperatures, etc., etc. So there's all kinds of stuff in here. Okay, let's jump into a couple other additions for summer of 2021. We actually decided on this in the spring of 2020 to do this for summer 2020, but obviously we didn't have camp in summer of 2020 because of COVID-19. But the new biggest change is that we are going to be using the Bolus Wizard on the insulin pumps. I'm personally very excited about this because it's going to do two things. One, it's going to make the process before meals a whole heck of a lot faster, because with the Bolus Wizard, you're not going to have to do cheat sheets. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. And two, it's going to help a lot with preventing medication errors, because we have a computer, aka the pump, calculating the dose instead of a human being. How it works is there is a Bolus Wizard in every pump, right? It's named different things. Bolus Wizard is actually a copyrighted term from Medtronic. We just kind of used it because they were the first company to have made such a thing. But what it is just a calculator. So it's calculating the dose of insulin the exact same way that you have learned to do so on paper, and how I taught you how to do so in the documentation video. It's taking into account the 3-hour rule, which is that you don't give a correction for a high blood sugar unless it's been more than 3 hours since the last insulin dose. Right? It's very important with insulin injections because the injection of insulin is going to last 3 hours. But with a pump, since you have a computer that knows exactly when you gave the last dose of insulin and exactly how much insulin you gave, it's able to calculate the 3-hour rule for you. And in some cases, you're able to give a correction sooner than you otherwise would, but at a lesser amount. So how a Bolus Wizard works is that you have inputted into the pump the carb ratios and the correction factors and the target blood sugar into the pump. So these are all settings that the pump knows. Then all you need to do is enter in the blood sugar, the grams of carbs. It will calculate the dose for you. You press a button and it gives that dose. Right? This has so many benefits, right? Like I've said, it's a computer calculating it, so we don't have to worry about human error with math. It can calculate the 3-hour rule in a more advanced and safe way. And it maintains the data in the pump. When we give the manual Bolus which is how we used to do it before. Sometimes kids would come for an appointment with their CDE after camp, and we would not be able to see any data. All we could see are random doses of insulin. The other thing to keep in mind is, since we're switching to using the Bolus Wizard, now the pump settings need to make sure that they are correctly set inside of the pump. This is done almost identical to changing the basal rates, which the nurses at camp already are able to do. But this is one reason why we're going to have those technology facilitators at camp, the tech facts. They're there to help make sure that things like carb ratios and correction factors get changed in the pump, and they're always going to be available at meal times to make sure that these are done. The important thing to keep in mind is, if the endocrinologist makes a change to a carb ratio or to a correction factor, that change needs to be made inside of the pump before the next meal that it's going to take effect at, right? So for example, a lot of endos review the data in the mornings, right? And they might make changes before lunch. So you would make sure, if there is a change to the lunch carb ratio or the lunch correction factor, that change is being made in the pump before you do the bolus for lunch that day. It was always important to check for changes from the endo before, but now you're just checking for those changes and making sure that they're made inside the pump. Now, the Bolus Wizard is extremely easy to use. I think this will make it a lot easier for new nurses coming to camp instead of harder. It's simply a matter of knowing what buttons to press, and that's it. So I'm going to go in and specifically show you how to use the Bolus Wizard on the 3 most common pumps that you're going to see at camp. This, of course, doesn't cover every single pump out there, but it'll be extremely unusual that you would see a different pump than these 3. So let's jump into that. So here's the Tslim X2 insulin pump. So first, to use the Bolus Wizard, we're going to need to turn on the screen. There's a little button up here. You just press it. Boom, screen turned on. Now we're going to wake up the screen. You got to press 1, 2, 3. The screen is awake. So to give a bolus, where do you think we would press? Right where it says bolus, you're correct. Very easy, right? Now on the screen, there's a place to enter carbs and a place to enter BG, blood glucose, right? Super, super simple. So we're going to press add BG, and you would type in the camper's blood sugar. Let's pretend it's 150. We'll type in 150 and hit done. It's going to ask us this question every time we enter a blood sugar. It says your BG is above target. Add correction bolus. Pretty much at camp, you're always going to say yes to this unless you have a good reason not to. You can refer to the med guide as to like when you would and when you wouldn't. But suffice to say, majority of the time you're going to say yes. So we're going to go ahead and say yes. Now it's added in the correction dose. So you can see it's already calculated here, 0.8. Now we're going to add in the carbs. So see right where it says carbs, we're going to press that. We're going to enter carbs, right? Let's say we're eating 51 grams. You would hit done. See at the top here, it says 4.2 units. It's calculated the dose for us. Easy peasy. If you're ever curious, right down here, there's view calculation. It'll actually show you the exact calculation it did, and it will show you the ratios that it's using. So in case the dose that comes up is maybe weird, you weren't expecting it, you can go in here and just make sure that the settings are correct. But it's a computer. It's going to calculate the dose properly. So next we're going to hit next, confirm everything, confirm the blood sugar we entered is correct, confirm the carbs are correct, hit yes, and we're going to hit deliver. You see a splash, you know that the bolus is going in. After the bolus goes in, you're going to see it start requesting the bolus here, and then eventually it will start saying delivering. If you ever make a mistake, you can hit the cancel right away. It will cancel a bolus and no insulin will go in. If you wait too long and it starts to deliver the bolus before you hit cancel, it'll then show you a screen that shows how much insulin actually went in. So one last thing. If you go to bolus and say you enter a blood sugar that is below their target, right? Say it's 80. It is going to ask you a different question. Your blood sugar is below target. Reduce bolus calculation. This is what's known as a reverse calculation, which we typically do not do at camp. So if this is ever the case, you're generally going to be hitting no. Again, you can refer to the med guide for more information on that. I just wanted to show you because it's a little unique for this pump. If you ever need to get back to the home screen, press the little T and you can go back. And that's it. This is the Medtronic 670G pump. To give a bolus with this one, first we got to wake it up as well. You can press any button and you'll see the screen come up with a little lock symbol. That means it's locked. We need to unlock the screen. So we're going to press any button, and then it will tell you what key to press to unlock it. Here it's telling us the up, so I'm going to press up. There we go. Screen is unlocked. It'll bring you to the menu screen. What's at the very top? Bolus. So where do you think we would press to give a bolus? You got it, right here. So we're going to press the center button and get into the bolus menu. We are going to be using Bolus Wizard. It says so right here. So we're going to again hit the center button to go into the Bolus Wizard. Here, you see there's a line for BG and then a little lower, a line for carbs. So we're going to press in the center, and then we're going to use the up and down arrows to input the blood sugar. This can be a little annoying if the blood sugar is very high, because you've got to kind of sit and wait and look at your watch for it to go up, right? But you would enter the blood sugar that way. See, as I'm changing it, it's calculating the dose right here. Then we're going to enter the carbs. Same thing, press in the center, use the up and down arrows, and enter the grams of carbs the camper is planning to eat. So we see we have 201 and 47. So it's calculated the doses right here and calculated the total bolus. We're going to hit next, and then it's going to confirm again, this is the bolus you want to give. You press deliver, and then it's going to start delivering the bolus. As it delivers the bolus, you're going to see it crawl across the screen right here and see how much is going in at each time. If you ever make a mistake, you would simply press the center button and you can hit stop bolus. You would have to confirm that, and it will tell you exactly how much insulin did go in. And that's it. This is the Omnipod DASH. See, it looks a lot like a smartphone. It is actually not a smartphone. It is an insulin pump. Although, a funny fact, it technically also is a smartphone. It's a locked-down Android device. There's your fun fact for the day. Anyway, so the first thing we need to do to use the Bolus Wizard is turn on the screen. There's a little button right here. There's 2 buttons for volume and then 1 for the power. So we're going to press that power button, and the screen's going to turn on. We're going to need to swipe to unlock, so you can swipe up, down, left, right, whatever you like. And then we're going to enter a code, right? So the code for this you can actually find on the back. If you look at the back, there is a serial number right here. Those last 4 digits of the serial number, that's what we're going to use. So for example, mine is 0311. So I'm going to go ahead, flip that over and put it in. So here we go. We're going to swipe it and put in 0311. Check. Ta-da! It worked. Now, to give a bolus, where do you think we would press? You mean the big button down here that says bolus? You are correct, right? So we're going to press bolus. Then you will see a place where you can enter carbs and a place where you can enter BG. So that's exactly what we'll do. Let's start with the carbs since it's up here. So you would go ahead and press in here and type in the carbs. Let's say 25. It's going to calculate the dose right here. Then for enter BG, we're going to press enter BG. You press in the center, you can type in the blood sugar. Let's say it's 147. We've typed in the blood sugar and pressed OK. Then right down here, we're going to press add to calculator. So see, it added that blood sugar and it calculated the dose. And you'll see down here, our total bolus has been calculated. We're going to press confirm. It's again going to show you the blood sugar and the grams of carbs that you entered and the bolus. If you ever want to see the calculations, you can actually press right down here and it will show you the whole calculations along with all the ratios that it's currently using. But once you confirm, you would hit start and would go ahead and give the bolus. You'll see a screen like this, says delivering bolus. Now the interesting thing to remember about the Omnipod is since it's wireless, at this point, right after it delivers the bolus, the PDM now does not need to be nearby the kiddo. It basically sends that instruction wirelessly initially to the pump. Once that instruction is received, it doesn't need to be nearby the pump anymore. So as soon as you see this screen and it's delivering the bolus, you can put the PDM away and the camper will still get the insulin. If you ever make a mistake, there's a button right here that says cancel. You would just go ahead and hit yes to cancel it. You'll hear the pod make a beep and it will tell you exactly how much went in. For example, 1 unit is what actually went in before I canceled it. And that's it. All right, this is the Omnipod Eros. It's a slightly older version of the Omnipod, but still pretty common to see with kiddos at camp. So first thing we need to do to give a bolus is to wake up the screen. You see there's a little home button right there with the little house. We're going to press that little house and the screen will turn on. We're going to press confirm to get into the screen. You're going to see a screen like this with a little button down here. These surface buttons here, 1, 2, 3, correlate to the words right above them. So see how this says home with a button underneath it? That's what we want. So we're going to press this button right here and it will wake up the screen. Now, what do you think we would select to give a bolus? Right where it says bolus, you got it. So see how this button now correlates with select? So we're going to press this surface button right here. Enter current BG. So we're going to enter the blood sugar. You see how there are arrow buttons down here? So you're going to press up or down to enter the blood sugar, right? The higher you go, the longer it takes. So it can take a while to put in a really high blood sugar, right? Now, so we would enter it in, and it's asking us this question. Use for bolus calcs, right? You have yes or no. Similar to the T-Slim pump, you're pretty much always going to say yes to this question unless you have a good reason not to, right? So right here, we're going to say yes. And it's going to ask us, are you going to eat now? Generally speaking, you're going to be saying yes to this as well because we're always giving insulin at meals. So we're going to put yes. Now it says enter the carb value for the food you're about to eat. So we're going to enter the carbs. Same thing, these two arrow buttons. We're going to press up and hold until we get the amount of carbs that we want. Then we're going to press enter right down here. It's going to confirm the blood sugar and the carbs that we entered. Now the center button says confirm, so I'm going to press the center button. It's going to show us the bolus dose that it calculated, and we're going to press right over here on the right where it says enter, enter. Then again, it's going to confirm one more time, confirm in the center, so the center button, we press confirm. It's going to communicate with that pod. If it does this, you just move the pod a little bit closer, which is what I just did. Now the communication is successful, and it's delivering the bolus. You'll see this screen delivering bolus. This is the same with the Omnipod DASH, where right after it sends that instruction to the pod and you see this screen delivering bolus, the PDM now doesn't have to stay nearby the camper anymore. That bolus is going to deliver either way. So at this point, you would be able to take it and put it in your tackle box. They don't need it anymore. If you make a mistake, of course, we've got cancel right here, so you could press cancel, and it's again going to tell you exactly how much insulin went in before you canceled it. You would hit OK. And that's it. Super simple. Great. So now that you know how to use the Bolus Wizard, there's just one more thing to keep in mind. Before the meal, when normally you'd be doing the cheat sheet to calculate the dose for every camper, now with the Bolus Wizard, you're not going to need to do the cheat sheet for any campers on pumps. So this is going to make it a whole lot faster to do the steps you need to do before each meal. 70 to 80% of our campers use insulin pumps. So that means the vast majority of the campers in your cabin, you're not going to need to calculate insulin doses before the meal. You're simply going to need to know how to use the Bolus Wizard, or at least how to supervise the camper using the Bolus Wizard. Make sure that the camper or you are entering the right blood sugar and the right grams of carbs, and the pump is going to calculate the right dose. The one exception to this rule is going to be campers that are using a very specific type of closed loop system. So this is the T-Slim X2 pump with Control IQ. Now, you're going to know in advance specifically which campers in your cabin are using this very specific type of insulin pump, but it's likely going to be a lot of kids at camp this summer. We'll just kind of have to see how many there are, but I anticipate it's going to be the vast majority of the kiddos that were already using that pump before, which was a lot of kids. Now, those specific closed loop systems are going to be managed by the technology facilitators. So it's going to be the tech facts that are supervising the campers entering their blood sugar and carbs into the pump, and then the child is pressing the go button, the confirm button, to give that dose that is calculated by the pump. The big change here is that the cabin nurse is not supervising these specific campers. It's just the technology facilitators. The other change with this is just with documentation. All the T-Slim X2 with Control IQ pumps are going to be able to be uploaded to a website. When we upload it, we're going to be able to see all of the data in that pump, every blood sugar, every carb, every insulin dose that has been given at camp. That's going to serve as our documentation for the dosing at camp. So the nice thing about this is that the Cardex, the bottom part of the Cardex, where normally you're writing the insulin doses, the only thing that's going to need to be documented in the Cardex now is going to be the blood sugar and the carbs, right? We're not going to need to write the insulin doses because when we upload the pump at the end of camp, then we're going to have the insulin doses. So that also makes it a lot easier for your cabin nurses. The Tslim X2 with Control-IQ campers are not going to be your responsibility at mealtime. They're going to be the tech fac's responsibility, and the documentation is extremely easy. The tech fac is going to write in the blood sugar and the carbs and not need to write in the insulin dose. One more change to help make it easy to tell the difference between different kinds of insulin pumps is those bottom Cardexes are going to be different colors depending on what you got. Typically they are white, right? Now we're going to add two different colors. So we're going to have red. This is for a camper using a closed loop insulin pump system that is not the Tslim Control-IQ system. So for example, that would be someone using the Medtronic 670G with auto mode system, which is a whole other beast. The Tslim X2 with Control-IQ kiddos are going to have a goldenrod or a yellow bottom Cardex sheet. So that way it's nice when you have your big folder of all the Cardexes and you're flipping through. Based on the color, you'll be able to see from a distance what type of system that camper is using. So for example, if I'm a cabin nurse and I see I have a goldenrod bottom sheet, I know that this is a Control-IQ camper. I know that this camper's meal times are going to be managed by the tech fac. For example, if I see red, I know that that is an auto mode using camper. And if I see white, I know that they are not on Control-IQ, they are not on a closed loop system, they're on either a regular insulin pump or on shots. So it makes it a lot easier to see from a distance what you've got. So the last thing that I'm going to add as a part of this video is just something very minor that's been changed that I didn't really have another good place to put. So if you'll remember in my documentation video, there's a section where I talk about how you document insulin pump site changes, because we change those pump sites every 2 days at camp. And what you do is you draw a red triangle in the time period that the pump site was changed, right? That is still the same. Now, since we have so many more continuous glucose monitors or sensors at camp, we're also documenting any sensor changes. So you would document them very similar to an insulin pump site change, except you're writing a little red C in the time period that that sensor was changed. A lot of sensors won't need to be changed at camp. A lot will be needed to change several times if a lot fall off. But whenever you change one, you're writing a little red C. Thank you so much for watching this video. That is all the documentation updates for 2021. Make sure if you are a new nurse coming to camp for 2021, you are also reviewing the other training videos, especially the documentation video. All of that information is still relevant. It's just some of it is being done digitally, and that's what I've taught during this. So if you haven't watched that video yet, please go back and watch that now, so that way you can get all of that information as well. Great, thanks so much. I'll see you at camp.